What do you say? What do you know? It's the full Monte Sports Show. It is Sunday, March 21st, 2020. I am your host, Monte Perez, a.k.a. The Sports Whisperer. We are fired up and ready to go today. Got some great news this morning. We got from Room Raider an 8 out of 10 for this beautiful background that we have here. Again, an 8 out of 10. From Room Raider. I don't know if you guys know this, but I was obsessed with the way this setup would look. This is the original plan. We started from the bottom. Now we're up to number 8. So thank you all. I think my friend Andrea, who got me that Green Bay Packer helmet, really added the final piece and, of course, the plants. So, again, started from the bottom. And now we are number 8. I want to thank everyone for tuning into the Full Monty Sports Show last week. We had 37 states watch our show across the country. 37 states. We are trending number 3 on YouTube for sports shows. Trending number 3 on YouTube for sports shows. And listen, it's not the background. It's not me. It's my guests. We have the best guests all across the country and the best fans all across the country. And this week is no exception. In about 15 minutes, we're going to have Dan Goodwin III come on and join us and talk everything you need to know about Chicago sports. And then we're going to have one of our favorites, Chris Roseville, who's going to talk about what are the Saints going to do now that Drew Brees is walking. I got my Syracuse orange shirt, my Syracuse Orangeman shirt on. Had a huge first-round victory. My brother Pete said I look like someone who should be working on a highway with this orange shirt on. He also said, where do you keep the batteries? So I'm not too happy with my brother Pete mocking my fashion statement. This is all for the Syracuse Orangemen. Obviously, the Duke Blue Devils are not in it this year, so I'm rooting for Syracuse. And we'll get more to March Madness. We got all your sports covered. But first, let's start our journey today with this. Look, I started this a few weeks ago. And actually a month ago, and we think it's hilarious. I moved to Florida probably a little over 2.5 years ago, and there are things here that only happen in Florida. Okay, let's start with this. So there's a woman, there was a woman named Kenesha Posey, who was one of 2 passengers in a car stopped by Fort Pierce police in late March. Police say an officer smelled marijuana, that after steering the car and searching it, the car was swerving. They found cocaine. They found about 10 pounds of cocaine. And the woman said, and I quote, this is what she said, again, only in Florida. She said, it's a windy day. It must have flown through the window and in my purse. It must have flown. 10 pounds of cocaine flew through the window into her purse. I mean, come on. Now, when she went before the judge and they found that she was lying, the judge asked her why she was lying, and she said, well, Your Honor, I didn't want my niece and nephew to find out and have their lives be ruined because of my mistake. This is what she said. I didn't want their life to be ruined because of my mistake. Now, here's what I will say. Moving forward into the story, because I became fascinated with it, her niece and nephew live in Seattle. She hasn't seen them or spoken to them in over 10 years. So her excuse was admirable, but it was a lie. But it got me thinking, and all of you who are parents out there should know this feeling. Was there ever a time when you did something to your children and later that night you said, They're going to remember this the rest of their life. I made a mistake. I screwed up. This is going to affect them the rest of their lives. Now, I don't have any kids, but my niece and my friend's son, it got me thinking if I did something to them where it affected their life forever, and I'm going to give you two quick stories. She made it up. She said that, she didn't want her niece and nephew to be affected, but she hadn't seen them in a decade. But we've all had stories like, hey, is this going to screw up my niece, my nephew, my child? Did I make a huge mistake? So I'm going to start with my niece. Now, first of all, my niece, like me, as a child, was a bedwetter. Okay? Was a bedwetter. My niece, like me, was a bedwetter. So I'll never forget the time my sister said, I read an article and I'm getting very worried because they say that most serial killers were bedwetters. So now my sister is comparing my niece, because she was a bedwetter and so was I, to a serial killer. Now, if anyone knew my niece as a child and as an adult, she's like a hippie. She's like a hippie. Peace, love, harmony, tolerance for all different races, creeds. She's the most nonviolent person I ever met. Not like me, who carries around a switchblade in case I got to shank someone like Prison Mike. Okay? My niece is just filled with love, peace, and harmony. She's harmless. She's like a butterfly. So when my sister asked me this, and she said, I'm so nervous. Why do you think serial killers were bedwetters? And I said, I don't know. Maybe because they're used to hiding stains, like blood. They hide their urine stain from peeing on the bed. They hide their blood stain. She didn't like that answer. But my niece as a kid never did anything to annoy me. She was a great kid. Now, she never texts me now. She barely talks to me. I don't blame her. Who wants to spend time with me? I'm annoying. But as a kid, she was harmless. The only thing that she did to annoy me from the time she was like 5 to like 17, we would always go out to restaurants. And when the waiter came over, Alexa would always be like, I don't know what I want. And she'd panic. I don't know what I want. The waiter could come in 2 minutes or 20 minutes. And she was always like, I don't know what I want. And I'd always be like, hold on. Let's not pretend that you get anything different than 3 foods. My niece growing up ordered the same 3 things, whether we went to the fanciest restaurant in the world or Chili's or Outback. It was the same thing. Butter pasta, cheese quesadilla, and chicken fingers. That's what she ordered. Butter pasta, cheese quesadilla, chicken fingers. But my niece acted like she was Stanley Tucci searching for Italy. My niece acted like she was Anthony Bourdain trying all sorts of food. Let's relax. There was 3 food. Hey, you go to any restaurant, these are the 3 foods she ordered. Okay, so going back to the original point of, did you ever do something that you thought was going to screw up your child? Yes. My niece was probably, I think, 3. She was going to daycare. And the first day, my sister went from 9 to 11, sat there, watched Alexa, then brought her home. Second day, my brother Pete brings Alexa to daycare, 9 to 12, sits there for 3 hours, brings her back home. So on the third day, when I have to go, I got to drop her off at 9 and I have to leave. We got to let Alexa know that she will be safe. She will have fun. She will sit there in daycare by herself. So I drop her off. I wait like 10 minutes. I go, bye, Alexa. And she starts crying. Don't leave me. Don't leave me. The look of fear on her face was so terrifying to me. I had to leave. I had to show her that she's going to be fine there. We can't stay there. She's got to be left alone like all the other kids. She's crying and looking at me like, you're abandoning me, crying hysterically. I go in my car And I just break down. I want to go back in. I call my sister. I'm like, she's crying. I got to go back in. My sister's like, no, we have to show her that she has to stay there. We have to show her that she has to stay there. One of the worst days of my life growing up helping to raise my niece. Pick her up, she runs, she hugs me, everything's fine. But the look on her face traumatized me for years because I was responsible, not disciplining her. By the way, I've never hit my niece, not just because I left her alone. So fast forward before I moved to Florida, I picked my niece up at St. John's University. She's coming to the house for the weekend, and we get sidetracked because there's traffic. So it turns out we wind up passing the very daycare that she went to as a kid. And I said, Alexa, do you remember that daycare? She's like, yeah. I was like, do you remember the day I left you and you were so scared and you cried? And this was her response. What are you talking about? I love that daycare. That daycare was so much fun. The teachers were great. I have friends that I still keep in touch with. That was the best school I ever went to. What? What? I sat in the car and cried like a baby, hiccuping because I left my niece. I abandoned her, and she doesn't even remember. She loved that daycare. I thought she was traumatized for life, but nothing. I lost sleep. I would have nightmares a decade later. Nothing. So thank goodness I may have screwed up my niece in other ways. She's like Rain Man with movie quotes and song lyrics because all I do is talk in song lyrics and movie quotes. But thank goodness she didn't remember that day in daycare where she cried for like hysterically. All right, so that's the first thing that got me scared. Now I'm sure you're all reliving moments right now where you kind of think you messed up your child or did something wrong. So I want to talk about my friend Mike real quick and my friend Mike's son, Mike Jr. Now, when Mike had the child, by his own admission, he did not know what to do. My friend Mike just never knew how to take care of his son. Thank God for his wife, right? He just played stupid pranks, didn't know. When the baby was born, Mike's in the delivery room and he says, what do we feed it? What do we feed it? Like his baby is some sort of hamster. What do we feed it? Now, Mike Jr. was and is a genius. Thank God he's got his mom's and his grandfather's brains. But the thing about Mike Jr., when he was a kid, he never cried. The first time he got a shot, he had to get a shot. The doctor offered him a lollipop if he didn't cry. He didn't take the lollipop. He didn't cry. And the mom said, wow, what an amazing kid. He's going to be so strong. He's going to be so strong. And what does Mike respond with? What does Mike respond with? Mike says, yeah, either he's going to be strong or he's going to be a serial killer. That's what he says. What kid doesn't cry when he gets his first shot? Boy or girl? Now, when Mike Jr. was 3, me and Mike built this car, this race bed car. It took us 10 hours, a case of beer, 2 orders of Chinese food to build it. This kid was so smart. When he got to be 3, one day Mike walks in his room. He's taking apart the car, and then he puts it back together. At 3 years old. At 3 years old, I thought pork chop and karate chop were the same thing. That's how stupid I was. This kid's taking apart cars and putting them back together. So we have this genius of a kid who never cries. So the movie, he was obsessed with the movie Men in Black. Obsessed with the movie Men in Black for some reason. And I'll never forget the day I go to their house in 2018, the first game of the season, where Tom Brady towards his ACL and he's out for the year. Mike and Mike Jr. are die-hard Patriot fans. After this happened, after the first quarter, Mike's wife calls him and said her car's not starting at the supermarket. He needs to go help her get a jump. He leaves Mike Jr. with me. Again, the kid is obsessed with the movie Men in Black. He made his own neuralizer. For those of you who don't know what the neuralizer is with the movie Men in Black, it erases your memory. And the big thing that he used to love to do, he would run up to me, press the neuralizer, and say, Monte. And I would go, oh, who am I? And then he would say, you're a girl. You're a football player. You're a wrestler. You're a singer. And I'd have to act it out. It was his favorite thing to do to me. He loved Men in Black. He loved this neuralizer. So Mike leaves. He goes to start his wife's car, and their dog comes up to me, and the dog all of a sudden, for no reason, starts peeing on me. I pick up the dog, try to get it outside, and then the dog throws up on me. The dog's sick. As I'm doing this, Mike Jr. says, Monte, Men in Black. He puts on his sunglasses. He flashes that thing at me. And I say, Mike, not now. First of all, I always called him Michael or MJ. I said, Mike, not now. The dog's throwing up on me. I'm getting peed on. I'm trying to just get the dog outside. And all of a sudden, what do I see? Mike Jr. starts to cry. He starts to cry. To make matters even worse, he takes the neuralizer and he points it at himself. He points it at himself because I traumatized him so much. He wants to forget the fact that I yelled at him. Mike comes home with Michelle. I tell them what happened. I'm so upset. I'm cleaning off puke. I'm telling them about Mike Jr. She goes into the room and she goes, he's fine. I'm like, what do you mean? He was crying hysterically. They're like, he was crying? I'm like, he was crying and he flashed the neuralizer on himself. Fast forward, I'm leaving for Florida. I'm driving down here. Mike calls me with Mike Jr. in the car. Mike Jr. got a full scholarship to Stanford, a full scholarship to Stanford Science Division. The kid's a genius. I said, wow, what are you going to be doing? He said, I'm going to be working on lasers. So I asked him, wow, do you remember the neuralizer? Do you remember when Tom Brady got injured? Your dad had to leave, and I yelled at you and you cried? His response, I don't remember any of that. I said, you don't remember that? You don't? And his dad's like, you don't remember when Tom Brady got injured, his torn ACL? We were so miserable. He's like, I don't remember it. So here's my final thought. Is he such a genius that the neuralizer that he invented when he shot it at himself, did he forget? He doesn't remember Tom Brady getting hurt. He doesn't remember me coming over and yelling at him and him crying for the first time since, from the time he was 2 to the time he was 10. He's a genius. He's going to Stanford. He's at Stanford on a full scholarship working on laser technology. So my point is to this story is we all think that we're going to affect our kids, our nieces, our grandkids, and we don't. They are strong. They are resilient. Neither one of these two remembered my story. And that is the end of my opening rant. Let's do something we love to do. Let's surf the crowd before we get to the good, the bad, and the ugly. Yes. Well, yeah. I got an 8 out of 10, and George says the Oregon banner is preventing it from being 10 out of 10. People agreeing with my brother Pete that my shirt looks like I should be on a construction crew. Yeah. That is true. Listen, Greg, normal is boring, okay? Normal is... Can we stop? I did not traumatize my niece. She didn't even remember it. Wow. And my sister, more than once that I traumatized my niece. Here we go. Once again, killing it with spring colors. Yes, I am. You don't leave me. You can't go wrong with butter pasta, chicken fingers, and cheese quesadilla as a kid. You can't go wrong. Yes, I did. Thank you, Joel Diaz. I did get traumatized more than her. I did get traumatized more than her. Thank you, Joel Diaz, for coming to my defense. I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Yes. 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 I have so many stories. Okay. We're going to get Daniel Goodwin on in about 5 minutes. But first, let's start the show with the good, the bad, and the ugly. Listen, guys, this is going to be very, very intense. The good and bad and the ugly. You may not agree with what I'm going to say, but I'm going to say it anyway. All right. The NFL, congratulations to them. They just signed a new deal that will pay billions over the next 11 seasons. The deals mostly keep games where they've been for the last few years. The biggest change includes the Walt Disney Company adding 2 Super Bowls on ABC to its ESPN Monday night deal, and Amazon becoming the primary carrier of Thursday night football, with Fox dropping out of the package. Look, the NFL signed a $100 billion deal. You wonder why Roger Goodell makes $35 million a year, $45 million a year. Well, this is why. They just signed a $100 billion deal. So for all you people who said, I'm protesting the NFL because they're kneeling, they're making money left and right. They're making money left and right. So that's the good. Now let's get to the bad. Listen, Brad Stevens, this Celtic team hasn't been right all year long. There are now rumors that Brad Stevens may go coach the University of Indiana, go back to college. Brad Stevens said, I am not engaging in these rumors. I have no reason to leave. I am not taking the job. But here's the thing, guys. We know this. If you cover sports, stories don't get leaked unless they want them to be leaked. They don't get leaked unless they want them to be leaked. So Brad Stevens, who's done a good job, not great in Boston, there's something not right with this team. Maybe the players are getting the sense of urgency that maybe Brad Stevens is leaving. We don't know. But stories like this don't get leaked unless you want it to get leaked. That's why I say this all the time. One of the reasons why I didn't like the former guy in the White House is because everything was leaked. Everything got leaked. Under Obama, nothing got leaked. Okay? Tight organizations. For example, when the Clippers were going to get Kawhi Leonard, no one knew about it. No one knew. Everyone knew he went out to lunch with the Lakers and Magic Johnson because they leaked the story. Great organizations keep everything tight. There's no leaking. There's no leaking. Okay? And bad run organizations like the Jets, there's always leaking. So I'm not saying Brad Stevens going to leave, but you don't leak a story unless you have one of two things. You want the story to be leaked or you run a bad organization. I think Brad Stevens is a great coach. I think he wanted this story to be leaked. So that's the bad. Now let's get the good, the bad, and the ugly. Look, guys, I'm just going to come out and say it. Okay? We all love March Madness. Okay? We all love the upsets. But I'm going to say it again. March Madness is the greatest sports lie ever perpetrated on the American public, and here's why. Cinderella has zero chance of winning. Zero. Yes, Cinderella can win a game. Ohio beat Virginia. Oral Roberts beat Ohio State. But when you look at the history of the NCAA tournament, as I post Christian Laettner and Duke stepping on Kentucky right there, because Duke's not in it this year. That's why I'm wearing Syracuse orange. Okay? But let's just look at the history. You know, I got into an argument with Greg on Twitter. He's like, what about Villanova? Well, Villanova was an 8 seed. They played Georgetown 3 times that year. Wasn't an upset. This is the only Cinderellas to make the Final Four. LSU Tigers in 1986, a number 11 seed. George Mason, 2006, a number 11 seed. VCU Rams, 2011, made the Final Four. Guys, they all lost. They never played for a title. So stop with this BS that March Madness is so great because Cinderella can win. No, he can't. Cinderella has never won. Cinderella will never win. Yes, you have upsets in the first round. I'm shocked right now because in the Nuts and Bolts Sports NCAA office pool, I'm number 2 behind George Lopez. I suck in the early rounds. Why? Because I don't factor in upsets. I had Syracuse winning. Every once in a while, I'll pick a 12 versus a 5. But I don't believe in upsets. I don't believe in them. Do they happen in the first 2 rounds? Yes. Give you an example, and then we'll get Dan Goodwin on. Look, a few years ago, I was last going into the Elite Eight. I picked all 4 Final Fours. I picked Wisconsin, Kentucky, Michigan State, Duke. I had Duke beating Michigan State. When Kentucky was undefeated, I had Wisconsin beating them, and then I had Duke beating Wisconsin. I won a lot of money, and everyone in my office was like, oh, you're a genius. You're so smart. Really? What happened to the 15 years when I lost by the second round? I wasn't just a genius because I normally go chalk. And what I mean by that is I'm always 9 times out of 10 going to pick the higher seed because that's what March Madness is. The first 2 rounds, you'll get your Steph Currys from Davidson. How about me finding that Steph Curry gift right there from Davidson? And by the way, let me just say this, and then we'll move on. Let me just say this. If Syracuse wins today, my boy Buddy Boeheim could have a Steph Curry-like run in this tournament. Over the last 3 games, he's had 30, 27, and 30 points. I'm all in on the Syracuse Orange Man. I'm all in on the Syracuse Orange Man. All right, so there you have the good, the bad, and the ugly. All right, we're going to bring him on now. You can find him on Bears Brawl, 3 Kings podcast, wearing his Chicago Cubs hat. How are you, Dan? How's it going today?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure.
Oh, I love having you on. You bring so much passion and knowledge, but I got to be honest with you, Dan. I'm not even a Chicago Bears fan. When I saw what they did this week, my friend Andrea texted me, and she said, this is not real. This is not happening. And even though she texted me, my first reaction was that of Tom Cruise in the movie Rain Man. Can you repeat that? Because I can't believe my effing ears. The Bears have signed Andy Dalton to a 1-year, $10 million contract. And I'm saying it right now, Dan, I can't believe my effing ears.
Yeah, I couldn't believe mine either. When it came across my Twitter pages and I saw it, I was shocked. I didn't think that would ever be the case, that Andy Dalton would be coming to Chicago. But this is what we have. And it's concerning because, Andy Dalton, besides him not being better than what we currently had or what we had previously in Mitch Trubisky or Nick Foles, to be honest with you, him not being of that level, it's also concerning because what's he known for? A weak arm. And you put him in Chicago, in a windy city, in cold weather. How's that going to work out, man? You know what I mean? I just don't see it. I don't see him revitalizing his career or anything like that. Bridge quarterback, maybe, I guess. I don't know. I have no idea.
When people say this to me, I freak out all the time. When people say, okay, this is a bridge quarterback. Here's the deal. This is the NFL. We just saw that they have $100 billion contract. These sports franchises are worth hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars. You don't see bridge quarterbacks in good organizations. And here's what I don't understand. They made the playoffs last year with Mitchell Trubisky. You're bringing in a guy who can't throw the ball in cold weather because he's got a below-average arm. How in anyone's world is this an upgrade?
It's not an upgrade at all. It's a downgrade. Let's just be honest about it. It's a downgrade, but it's a panic move that they pulled off because they, were going the route of Russell Wilson or Deshaun Watson. Those, seem to have gone by the wayside. So they make a panic move and go and get Andy Dalton, which makes no sense. I mean, like I said, the Bears are notorious. I'm just going to be honest about it. And some people may not like what I'm about to say. They're notorious for being cheap. There's teams out here that are able to make things happen. Even though we had this pandemic and money dried up a little bit this year, the money's going to open back up, right? So that you got to do what you got to do. You got to step out there. You got to go full-fledged, right? And that's something that the Bears are not able to do. And we saw that yesterday with what happened with Kenny Golladay.
Okay, so here's what I'm going to say with that. This isn't the Green Bay Packers who, like the Green Bay Packers signed Aaron Jones to a 4-year, $48 million contract, and people were freaking out. Oh my God, it's so much money. I'm like, let's hold on. The Green Bay Packers don't sign big time free agents on offense. So but this is not some run of the mill, small city organization. This is the Chicago effing Bears.
Mm-hmm.
And you're telling me that this is the best you could do? Like, why not just say, okay, we're going to draft Mac Jones, right? With the 20th pick, because he's going to be available. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
this is not a small city. This is the second city. It's New York, LA, Chicago, whatever order you want to put it. How do you square this with the fans? I'm livid, and I'm not even a Chicago Bears fan.
You can't square it with the fans. The fans are not stupid. We know what it is, And the Bears, the ownership for the Chicago Bears, they've gotten over for so many years on the history of the Bears, right? The '85 Bears, Papa Bear Hallis, Soldier Field, all the things that go into that. They make so much money off of that, and the Bears fans they shell out so much money on jerseys and all kinds of things that they're okay with that. So they could put a product out there that's kind of inferior and not really, try to act like they're trying to do something, but really not really doing anything. And it's clear, it's evident. They don't have they don't go full-fledged. They don't go all the way for it. They hold something back all the time. And the fans are livid, they're upset, and they're not having it anymore either. They're calling for people to be fired.
No, I agree. And look, let's talk about this because I didn't like this move either. Bears cut Kyle Fuller. What'd you make of this? I mean, what is their game plan? Are they tanking?
Well, you cut Kyle Fuller to save $11 million, and you're saying that I signed Andy Dalton for 10. So that's basically what the cut was for.
Wow.
There's a lot of there's a lot of rumors that were passed around because he went to Vic Fangio and they said that Kyle Fuller really wanted to be gone from Chicago and this and that. But at the end of the day, he's under contract. I don't think that was the case. He didn't force his way out. There's some people that are saying that, and that's people that they're thinking they're trying to have some positivity about the situation and try to blame Kyle Fuller. But Fuller's been a stud for us for years. It's amazing that would happen. And like I said, the fan base is livid about it. They're upset about it, truly upset. So
well, thank you for saying end of the day. Get us started off with our bingo drinking game because you said at the end of the day. So thank you for that. Okay, so here's my situation. The off season is supposed to be about positive, high hopes. The moves that they made so far right now is showing me, at best, they're a 6-win team. At best, you're coming off a playoff appearance. You lost, fine. I say this all the time. As long as my team, I say this with the Oregon Ducks, I say this with any sports team. As long as my team is keeping me invested, right now the Knicks are keeping me invested. Normally the season's over by December. Normally the Jets season is over by Halloween. Bears fans, there's nothing to look forward to.
No, it's really it's dire times right now. We're coming off 2 seasons. 2019 we had a 4-game losing streak. 2020 they had a 6-game losing streak in there. It just gets worse. It seems to be getting worse and worse, right? We ended up 8-8. And they sold the ownership on. We went to the playoffs 2 out of the last 3 years, and so on and so forth. And that's fine. I get it, but you've really. They've taken a precipitous fall over the last couple of years, and it's bad, man. It's a bad look for the city. It's a bad look for the organization, and it's a callous look. That's the way I look at it. It's almost like, and I don't want to say. I'm going to say it. It's almost like sabotage. It's almost like the contracts that we've gotten involved in with Jimmy Graham and so many different ones. Nick Foles, we traded a 4th-round draft pick for Nick Foles, signed him to a contract. Now you bring in Andy Dalton saying that was a mistake. So you've made mistake after mistake after mistake at quarterback, mistake after mistake, at different positions on the field. It's just a bad look all around. And the regime probably needs to change fairly quickly. I don't see how they last.
You bring up some great points. Let's put some positives here. The Bears need Ferris Bueller to run the team. Dan, love the hat. Why don't you tell us what that hat is and who signed it?
Well, nobody signed it. That's actually, it says World Series champions 3 times.
That's awesome.
And I got this hat. It's a new era hat. It's a fitted hat. It's got one love there and the rose in there. That has a what is that? Wrigley Field patch there, and then that one's 100 years of the Cubs. So
that is awesome. All right, what are you going to do with the 20th pick? I mean, you're going to take a quarterback, right? Greg big up a good point here. Davis Mills, Kellen Mond, Mac Jones will be available.
Yeah, I think they're going to try to move up. It's a fluid situation that's going on. They know that they have some people that are upset. So they're going to try to make a move and do something. I don't know what it is. I also know that the Russell Wilson situation is a fluid, active situation as well. That's not done. That's not over with. It's a possibility that they can get him. June 1st is the date that I'm looking at, or before the draft. Seattle has 3 picks this year. So as the draft gets closer, they're going to.
What I'm saying is, if they believe that they were going to get him, you don't pay $10 million for a backup in Andy Dalton. You don't waste that money.
I agree. And there's some thought that one of those guys would be going back to Seattle, you know, as a stopgap for them, either Foles or Andy Dalton. I don't know. But Andy Dalton in his press conference said that they promised him that he'd be starting. Of course, we did the same thing with Mike Glennon in 2017. So, you know, the Bears are known to lie to people from time to time, especially quarterbacks.
Okay, Andrea brings up a great point here. Matt Nagy cannot survive if they go 6-10. They don't make the playoffs, right?
Fire Matt Nagy. I'm with you, Andrea. Fire Matt. I have a T-shirt. I should have brought it in here. Fire Matt Nagy, please.
He doesn't survive if they don't make the playoffs, right? It's almost like dead man walking.
No, I don't see how you could survive. Like I said, you know, you could stake your claim on making playoffs 2 out of 3 years, but like I said, you had a 4-game losing streak, you had a 6-game losing streak. You underachieved on every aspect of your coaching. You don't develop the talent that you do have, the players that you have. You don't develop them. It takes you a long time to really put together a offensive line that's conducive and that can work. So there's a lot of things that are flawed in his game. I think he's a good guy in general, right? So people like him, they're drawn to him and they listen to him. But at the end of the day, man, there's a lot that's expected that he's not doing.
So if they don't move up, would you go? Listen, I've said this for 3-4 weeks on this show. If this was 10 years ago, even 8 years ago, Mac Jones would be a top 5 pick in the NFL draft. But the fact that he doesn't run and he's not that mobile, the quarterback from Alabama, people aren't looking at him as a first rounder. But with the 20th pick, if you can't move up, what are you doing?
I think they're gonna either go Mac Jones or, believe it or not, Kyle Trask.
Right. Okay. Quarterback from Florida.
Yeah, I think Mac Jones. I think like you, I'm higher on Mac Jones as well. I don't think he's top 2 or 3, but I think it's a possibility that he goes earlier than 20.
Yeah, listen, I think they need quarterback help. And like I said, if they signed Andy Dalton to a 2-3 year deal, I wouldn't have been concerned. But there's, when you sign him for $10 million, that's not cheap. That is, Ryan Fitzpatrick money. That is, a starter to come in money. Jared says Jones is going to be gone at 8. I don't know if he goes that high, but yeah, you got to get a quarterback, right?
Yeah, we got to get a quarterback. There are quarterbacks out there. And I'm throwing a name out there that a lot of people are missing, that he's not on the radar. Jamie Newman. He played at Wake Forest. And he sat out last year. When he transferred to Georgia, he sat out. But he was a really good quarterback. He's got a lot of skill and potential.
All right, let's move to the Chicago Bulls. Listen, right now they're in the 9th, 10th position, but that's not a big deal because if you look at the East, you have teams 4 through 10 battling to try to make it. What are they doing here at the trade deadline? What do you like what's happened so far? Listen, I think they're playing much better than people thought. We talked about this a few weeks ago with Billy Donovan. I don't know why Zach LaVine isn't getting some MVP votes if they make the playoffs. He's averaging 28, 5, and 5. He does it every night. He's playing great. What do you see them doing here at the deadline?
Well, I just want to say, number one, Zach LaVine. I'm glad that he was a All-Star. Finally, he finally got his shot there, and he is a stud. He's no doubt he's one of the top players in the NBA. With that being said, I like what Billy Donovan's done. He's put out these guys. He's drawn them out. He's got some guys that are listening to him. They're listening to him. Number one, and then number two, he's putting out guys and letting them play the game of basketball. Sometimes you have to play the game of basketball in order to understand how to play it, right? And when you the coach that we had previous, he just sat back and he wanted to babysit everybody. But this guy lets guys play.
When you say let him
mistakes.
play, so people who are not familiar with that term, I love seeing coaches do this. My brother was watching the Ranger game last night, and the young defenseman made a mistake, and he's going off. I'm like, Pete, you got to let them grow on the job.
Exactly.
So you're saying Billy Donovan will not pull the trigger if a young player makes a mistake. He may talk to them during the timeout, but he's letting them grow up right before our eyes, right?
Exactly. He's letting those guys shine. He's letting them grow up before our eyes, learn on the cuff, learn what you're doing on the basketball court. And, of course, he coaches them up. You know what I mean? And that's a great thing, but he's letting them play. And I like that. I really do like that about what he's doing.
Listen, Billy Donovan was a great recruiter at Florida. I could share some stories with you as a former college basketball coach, how what Billy Donovan used to do is he would get someone who signs with Florida, and then during AAU tournaments, he would have them room with someone who wasn't sure where they were going, or when they went to basketball camp, he would have them room together. So he really took recruiting to another level. He wasn't cheating, but he was using it to his advantage. He won 2 national championships in Florida. Oklahoma City, we saw what they did last year with not a lot of talent. He's a very good coach. The final question for the Bulls, we're talking with Dan Goodwin here on the Full Monty Sports Show live on YouTube before we get to the Cubs. Is it better off that they don't make the playoffs, or you want to see them get that 8th spot, get some experience, and forget about the draft, just make the playoffs?
Yeah, forget about the draft. I've never been a guy that wants to tank. I want guys to win, learn, get that experience. They have a lot of young pieces on this team. There's one piece, and some people get upset when I say it, but I believe Wendell Carter plays a little smaller than what he is.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
He's undersized. He's 6'10".
Yeah,
he's 6'10". And I feel bad in that regard, because I feel like he should be playing power forward. So the Bulls, what they need to do is really solidify and focus on the center position, either in free agency or at the trade deadline, which I don't think there'll be buyers at.
How about go out and get JaVale McGee? Go out and get JaVale McGee from the Cleveland. Go out and get him. A rim protector. He's long. If you don't want to go after Drummond and pay that set, go after JaVale McGee. I want the Lakers to get him back.
Yeah, he's energetic, and he'll teach some of those young players how to play with that energetic attitude, that forceful attitude as well. And if Wendell Carter, if he's going to progress, then he's probably going to need somebody to show him how to play that center position that way.
Yeah, I agree with you. Okay, let's move finally to the Cubs. Listen, I absolutely loved Joe Madden, but I think Joe Madden has a lot of Bill Parcells in him. He wears out his welcome. He comes in. He turns teams around. He won a championship in 2016. We have David Ross taking over for him. Are you upset that Joe Madden's gone, or did you think, hey, he won us a championship for the first time in a century, it was worth it?
It was definitely worth it. That's number one. It was definitely worth it. I mean, I didn't think I would be able to see it, in my lifetime, right, because we were, but 2016 was an awesome year. So it was definitely worth it. I think I got mixed emotions on it. I liked John. I liked Madden very much, and I'm sorry to see him go. But at the same time, he does wear out his welcome on people sometimes. So
He's a lot like Joe Girardi. Remember Joe Girardi? Same way.
Absolutely. Same exact way. So it's I got mixed emotions about it, to be honest with you.
And how do you rate this team? Like I said, they made 5 out of the last 6 years playoffs. And before we get to that, I know you prepped for this show, but Dan, I just got to show you. Look at all the backgrounds I saw it. Look at it. And now this.
You've been cycling them through, man. I'm impressed. I'm very impressed.
So what's the ceiling for this team? Can we expect them to, make the playoffs again, have a run? Is it rebuilding? Did their championship window close, or do they still have something in the tank? For people who don't know about Cubs baseball, what do you expect?
Hey, a lot of people sleep on the Cubs, right? They slept on us last year. We won the division last year. All right, we went to the playoffs. They'll be in the playoffs again this year. I think they have a solid lineup. The lineup is actually stacked. You still got Chris Bryant, and they had some struggles, but let's be honest. It was a COVID season. You played 60 games. If you get on a little bit of a downer, it's going to last for a long time, but it seems like a longer time because it's only a 60-game season.
Can I
So
say that other than the Dodgers in the National League, they may have the best offensive lineup, or is that a stretch?
no, that's true. I think well, you gotta put Atlanta up there too. I put
Right,
Atlanta in
right.
there. But Atlanta, them and the Dodgers, they all have wonderful, powerful lineups. I mean, you got guys that can hit Javi Baez, Chris Bryant, Anthony Rizzo. You got of course Wilson Contreras, you got Jock Peterson. All these guys can really hit cleanup in a lot of different lineups. Right. So there's nothing for Wilson Contreras to be batting sixth or seventh. He's been doing that in sometime in spring training. So when you go that deep into the lineup and you still got heavy hitters on the roster, man, it's a good thing to see.
One
So
of the one of the things that I always struggle with, okay, and as a coach, as an assistant, as a head coach, I know how this works. When you have a guy who's no nonsense, okay, and then you bring in someone who's a little bit more laxed, that causes a problem because the players who didn't like the discipline all of a sudden start to crave that discipline. So the biggest difference, we got about a minute left. What's the biggest difference in these two coaching philosophies? What do you expect from your new head coach and David Ross?
I think David Ross is going to be a good head coach. I think he's going to be a wonderful manager. I think he brings a little bit of calm to the situation, not a disciplinarian, but at the same time they respect him.
Right.
He's been there before. He played with a lot of these
He played
guys
with a
on
lot
that
of those guys, like
2016
Joe
team.
Girardi did.
Exactly. So they'll respect him for that alone, right? Because they were able to see him and what he did in his years with Chicago. So that being the case, I think he's going to work out excellent. I think it's going to be a good thing. Hopefully that rotation gets a little bit deeper as for the
Listen what
pitching.
George wrote right
And
here.
we'll see. Yeah, Arrieta is a question mark. I think Arrieta is going to be fine. He's been improving in his starts in preseason. He's been improving very much. And let's not forget, there's Shelby Miller. We brought him in as a guy who was not even on the roster,
Good
but
point.
he's
Good
been
point.
playing. He's been pitching really, really good. I think his ERA is like 155 right now. So he's been
So
pitching good.
you're high on the Cubs then. You think it's going to be a fun summer.
I think it'll be a fun summer, as always. One of
All
my
right,
favorite
Dan.
times.
Thanks so much for joining us. How can we follow you? How can we support you? As soon as this Bears news broke, I had to reach out to you. I know my friend Andrea, who's a diehard Bears fan, loves when you come on. So how can we follow and support you?
Follow me at Twitter at Dan Goodwin III. You can see my podcast. It's on the Bears Brawl. It's entitled Three Kings. We get real. We talk real stuff about Chicago Bears. We're not homers. We just want to speak the truth, and we want to see the Bears succeed.
One of the things that my brother, who watches every NHL game, and I have the NBA League Pass, there's nothing worse when you get those local homer announcers. So thank God you just said that, because they are so bad, it's not even funny.
You got to have some objectivity, man.
Exactly. All right. Thanks so much, Dan. We'll see you down the road. Love having you on.
Thanks for having me.
All right. That was Dan Goodwin III. Always does a tremendous job. Listen, if you're a Chicago Bears fan, if you're a Chicago Bulls fan, Cubs, White Sox, whatever you want to do, Dan gets it done. Love having him on. And one of our favorite guests right now, Chris Rosevaglu. You can hear him on the podcast Sports Overtime. He writes for The Spun. Let me get the Chicago Cubs background out of there for you, and let's just get right to the Saints. Chris, how you doing this morning?
I'm doing well, Monty. How's everything?
I'm doing great. Listen, before we get to the Saints, I'm going to spotlight you, because out of all the guests that I have, okay, you have one of the best backgrounds I've ever seen. But I'm going to toot my own horn here. Because there's an organization on Twitter that rates your background. And look what they gave me.
Okay.
Cubs, Packers,
Yeah.
big plan, well composed, 8 out of 10.
That's a good score. I actually, Monte, you have the hover helmet. I have one too, but I have it in the front of my desk. I got to find a way to get it back here.
Oh
So
yeah,
we have
my
matching
friend
stuff.
gave this to me for my birthday. My friend Felix, my friend Andrea gave me that Packers helmet. So the hover helmet's awesome. You spin it once, it spins for hours.
Yeah, it's perfect. And I saw you when you tweeted out. I'm like, the room's coming together. It looks nice. I mean, even though it's Packers, I can't hate on it. It looks good.
No, it's funny because before I started this, we've been doing the show a little over 6 months. I did about 15 test shows with my friend Jared, Rico, Show Me the Money, Graziano, Joe, George, and I just tried so many different things. But as it looks now, I will change it up in the fall once we do football again. But this was really how I wanted it. This is exactly how I wanted it to look. So I'm very happy about that.
Yeah, absolutely. You did a great job. I'm actually interested to see what improvements you have too for the fall.
Yeah, I gotta,
We gotta bring it up.
All right, Chris. So listen, Drew Brees is retired. Okay. We kind of figured, I didn't think he was going to come back last year, but they kind of talked him into it. Before we talk about what they're going to do next year, what they're going to do without him, talk about what Drew Brees has meant to this city and this franchise that was a perennial loser, let's be honest, until Drew Brees arrived.
Yeah, absolutely. You hit the nail on the head there. And the thing about Drew, his reemergence and his rise to stardom actually went with the Saints, because the Saints obviously went through that period with Hurricane Katrina. There were some talks about, are they going to keep the team in New Orleans? There's a little bit of uncertainty there. And I think if Drew Brees doesn't become this rock star in New Orleans and go on this all-pro pace that he was on, I don't know if the Saints stay there. Like, there are some questions of, do they move them to a different city? What goes on there? And the thing about Drew is, you mentioned the perennial loser thing, and I actually tweeted about this when he retired. Drew was so good with Sean Payton that every year we felt like, hey, the Saints are a Super Bowl contender this year, and the only reason you would list them as such is because of their quarterback and their coach. And it didn't matter if they had a bad defense. It didn't matter if they had a great defense. Whatever the circumstance was, 2-minute drill, Drew Brees, game on the line, you feel like you got a pretty good shot to win. Saints never had that luxury before, and they had it with Drew. So for him to give them 15 years of excellence, I know it almost seems like it's not enough because it's one Super Bowl, and you've always felt like there was more meat on the bone, and there definitely was in 2018, 2019, 2017. But you got to marvel at what they did, and I think it really is special because Drew, a guy who everyone was ready to write off. I think people said he had an 80% chance of never throwing the football the same way again, and for him to come back, turn into a superstar, and pretty much put a Hall of Fame career. Like, I know Drew had one solid season in San Diego, but most of his work is all in New Orleans. So for him to line up, it's a beautiful story. Obviously, I'd want another Super Bowl with it, but overall, an impressive career from Drew, and it really is a story that will go down in NFL history.
This may be the best comment I've ever gotten on my show right here. Daniel Ben, Charger legend, Drew Brees. I mean, just think about that, right? The Chargers wanted Phillip Rivers. They said, we're taking Phillip Rivers, who, by the way, was their third or fourth choice because originally it was Eli Manning, right? So, and the Chargers said to themselves, Phillip Rivers is going to be a Hall of Famer, okay? But Phillip Rivers has nowhere near the career of Drew Brees. Saint fan must love Nick Saban for passing on signing Brees in Miami. So this goes to my next point. You wrote down Drew Brees has more records than an Applebee's menu or something like that, right? So was it a failure that they only went to one Super Bowl?
I don't know if I'll say failure, because the way I look at it, Monty, and it almost, if anything, I take that and I look at what Brady's been able to do, and I just feel like that's why people have to call him the undisputed GOAT. And the reason I say that is we look at Drew Brees, only one Super Bowl. We look at Aaron Rodgers, who I think is probably the best thrower of the football ever seen. Right now, he's stuck at that one Super Bowl number. Dan Marino, an all-time great. He didn't win a Super Bowl. So I don't know if I'll say it's a failure. Will I say it's disappointing and you feel like you wanted more? Yes. But it also comes back to, sometimes with football, it really is, you got to get lucky. The ball needs to bounce your way. And frankly, the ball has not been bouncing the Saints' way the last 4 seasons. That's for sure. And I would say it's more disappointing than it is a failure, because it really is hard to win at least one Super Bowl. And I look at a guy like Patrick Mahomes, who we know he'll have a shot to get another one. Don't get me wrong. But everyone was so quick to say, oh, well, Pat's going to win his second ring and he's going to have 2 championships at the age of 24. It doesn't always go that way. And I could use that for so many guys. Cam Newton's another one, made the Super Bowl, never got back. So I'm not going to say it's a failure. Well, I say it's disappointing, absolutely. But I think it's important when you look at the grand scheme of Drew's career and what happened. It's almost like from 2012 to 2016, the Saints wasted most of his prime years with a bad defense. And by the time they got him a great defense, his skill set starts declining a little bit. And they're trying to find this balance where it doesn't work. And I'm not going to sit here and complain to you about 2018 and say, oh, well, if they threw the flag, then the Saints make the Super Bowl, which they would have. I get that. But it's just, I would say, a series of unfortunate events like that book series. That's what I would say for the Saints.
This is how I look at it as a former coach. I used to tell Jared, who's in the chat room now, I used to tell him, Jared, you have to practice so hard, and you don't have to be great every night, but your bad game has to be everyone else's really good game. So when Jared had a bad game, he'd score 17 points, grab 8 rebounds. For example, when LeBron James has a bad game, he scores 20 points, he grabs 5 rebounds. That's a career. So when you said every year you had a chance to win the Super Bowl, to me, that's a success under anything, because let's face it, Aaron Rodgers has won Super Bowl. I think Aaron Rodgers is the best quarterback ever. My brother says Drew Brees. You may say Drew Brees. People, I'm just talking talent-wise. People may say Tom Brady's not the best ever. For example, he threw 3 interceptions against the Green Bay Packers. They won. So you have to be lucky. So I'm saying right now that Drew Brees, even though he only won 1 Super Bowl, you're disappointed, but all I can ask for is to just have a chance to get there, right?
No, absolutely. And you said it perfectly. And when you mention Aaron Rodgers, I'm in agreement with you. He is the most talented up until I would say Mahomes, but even then I'll still go with Aaron Rodgers, the most talented. And right now he's at 1, and Aaron Rodgers is going to be 38. So we don't know what's going on there. You just never know. If you get 1, then you're fortunate enough. And then if you have the chance to feel like you're a perennial contender, which they have been, you'll take it. Not everyone's going to be the Patriots. Actually, no one's going to be the Patriots.
Can I say this? I thought they were the best team, and they should have won the year Stephon Diggs had that kind of Hail Mary pass against Minnesota. I thought that was their best team, even when they won the Super Bowl. Do you agree with that?
I actually, funny enough, I do think it's their 3rd best team. And the reason I say that is I go back to 2011, and their defense was bad. Don't get me wrong. But their
defense was so bad that year.
It was so bad, but their offense was so prolific that I felt like if they just beat that 49ers team, they would have had the Giants in the Dome, a team that they beat by 20 plus about 2 weeks before the playoffs started. And I think that would have been the perfect script for them. And I know 2017 is way more balanced. I'll 100% give you that. But 2011, explosiveness with Sproles, with Jimmy Graham, with Mark Ingram, with Devery Henderson, Marcus Colston, Robert Meacham. I mean, I can list off a bunch of names, Lance Moore. That offense was just so explosive. The Saints offense in 2017 was more run heavy, but 2017's up there. I would say over the last 4 years, Monty, a lot of people say it's 2018 because they were so close. I do think it's 2017. I think 2017, the Saints were just playing with house money, and they were starting to realize, hey, we're a really good team. And if they do beat that Minnesota team and go to Philly, who knows what happens? You never know. But of course, now I'm left with a bunch of what ifs.
Right. Okay, so talk to us, because Emmanuel Sanders is now gone, okay? And he was a good fit, definitely a professional. I don't care what he did on the field. He was a solid professional, ran great routes, had some very good games. What are we doing now before we get to the quarterback position with this offseason? What is the priority for this team?
I think the priority is trying to get these veteran players on 1-year deals and hope that they just take that 1 year and then revisit the market next year when hopefully the cap goes up. And I think that's the Saints' best bet right now, because the Saints don't have a lot of cap space, obviously. That's been one of the main talking points for the last 2 months. And the Saints are not going to be in the market for these big names. But now that the first wave of free agency is pretty much over, can they target a Richard Sherman for a 1-year deal that's not too lucrative and maybe pair him with Marshawn Lattimore?
Would you like that?
So I would only like it, Monty, if they get a corner in the draft, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a little bit, right? Because although Sherman, I think, is a nice short-term fit, I mean, we also have to be realistic and say he is 32 and his speed is gone, and he did miss 11 games this past season. So that's also a concern for me. But if he wants to reunite with Chris Richard, his DB coach from Seattle, I understand it. I understand the scheme fit. So that's a potential guy for them. In terms of receiver, I really think the Saints might just cheap out and wait until the undrafted class, or maybe grab a mid-round guy, but that's an area of concern. I think they got to, if they can, get a veteran linebacker in the room, whether it's in free agency or whatnot. There are some holes here. And the problem with the Saints is what they just lost, because people talked about the cap hell. They didn't lose main pieces, but they lost a lot of key veterans. Emmanuel Sanders, who you mentioned, incredible guy, really good football player. I love his fit in Buffalo. Quan Alexander, he tore his Achilles. They had to cut him. So there goes your second best linebacker. They got rid of Janoris Jenkins. There goes your second best corner. So the Saints are losing depth guys that were really big pieces in their run last year. They got to find ways to get them. So if it is a Richard Sherman here, a veteran receiver there, I think that's their best bet because they're not going to be dishing out 2-3 year contracts. They just have to hope that these guys are saying, hey, I'll eat the money up front right now, and I'll just dip back to free agency next year, which is something we've seen with other guys like Juju Smith-Schuster a couple of days ago.
Right. Okay, so 2 quick questions. One regarding your background. Over your left shoulder, that is Deadpool, right?
That is Deadpool, yes.
Yes. I actually wanted to show you this because when I start the show, I do the good, the bad, and the ugly, and I always use the Deadpool in there.
That's
so
amazing.
You were the inspiration with that. So here's my second question now. Okay, if I'm Tampa Bay, if I'm Green Bay, who never signs free agents, okay, but if I'm Tampa Bay and I look at free agents, I say, hey, guys, sign a 1-year deal here. You could play with Tom Brady. Now that Breeze is gone, my thought process was they need to sign players for 2 or 3 years because no one's going to go to New Orleans with Jameis Winston and Taysom Hill. Drew Brees was the caveat. Drew Brees, like Tom Brady, was the guy. People want to play with Patrick Mahomes. Are you worried with your philosophy? And I agree with it. Hey, let's sign a 1-year deal. Are you worried that players may not think that they can win a championship now that he's gone?
I think maybe offensive players. I think you absolutely have a point because to what you said, Emmanuel Sanders, when he picked the Saints, he said, 1, it was close to home for him, and 2, he said, I wanted to play with Drew Brees. So that goes to your point, absolutely, that guys want to play with certain quarterbacks. I think when the Chargers signed their center last week, he said he wanted to play with Justin Herbert. So when you have a great quarterback, you have a good chance of adding these marquee free agents. I think defensively, the Saints will be fine. They've had a good scheme. I think they can get guys to buy in. And I'm going to keep bringing him up and people are going to get sick of him. But, if Richard Sherman's a guy who loves Chris Richard and he sees that the Saints have been a top 10 defense the last couple of years, I don't think Drew Brees leaving affects him because he can still go there and play with a DeMario Davis, a Cam Jordan, respected veterans who you want to play alongside Marshawn Lattimore, another one. Offensively, though, I absolutely agree. I think the Saints would need to prove that Jameis and Taysom Hill, whether it's a hybrid offense or whatever the heck Sean Payton's got schemed up for us this year, they need to prove that they can be productive. And if so, then I think they can get guys to buy back in. So it almost worked out where the excuse is they don't have money to spend this year. But I do agree with you. I don't know if a wide receiver, let's say like a Juju who was looking for a 1-year prove-it deal, or anyone else on the market like a Will Fuller, I don't know if they would go to New Orleans and risk putting their future on the arm of Jameis Winston. That's pretty risky. I don't know if I would gamble that. So I do agree with you. I think the Saints are going to have to show offensively, because defensively they could still get free agents, in my opinion. I think offensively they have to show that in the post-Breeze era they can put up points. And if they can, then I think they'll be able to get guys. But right now, if you're telling me there's a team in the NFC South that's going to be getting free agents on the cheap, good veterans, I agree. I think it'd be Tampa Bay.
Here's the deal. I look at Jameis Winston, right, and I look at him like Carmelo Anthony. Everybody in the NFL loves Jameis Winston. Everybody in the NBA loves Carmelo Anthony, but when Carmelo Anthony was with the Knicks, no one wanted to come play with him. So people may love Jameis Winston, but I don't know if he's going to lure players to come play with him. So let's talk about the QB position. Taysom Hill, walk us through this, because I had people texting me, are they insane? But this contract is not what it appears to be. The Saints agreed to a contract restructure, according to Adam Schefter from ESPN. It's a 4-year, $140 million contract extension. All years are voidable as the deal frees up $7.5 million in cap space. Jameis Winston signed the deal, $5.5 million. Now, people may say, what the hell's going on? Andy Dalton just signed a $10 million deal, but it's $12 million with incentives. Talk about first Taysom Hill's contract, how it's not as bad as people think.
Yeah, the Taysom Hill one was so funny because, true story, Monte, I'm at dinner on that Sunday when Drew Brees retires, and then 10 minutes later, Schefter puts out the report for Taysom Hill, and I'm sitting there, I'm eating, I look at my phone, I'm like, wait, what the heck just happened? I'm like, did they just give him this money? And then Schefter put the all years voidable right after the money, and I'm like, okay, thank God, it's fine. But yeah, it's the Saints' way of, one, kicking that cap number down the road. They're smoothing it out, saving a little cap space that they needed this year to end up actually bringing Jameis back as well. It's not actually 4-year 140. The interesting thing that someone pointed out, you never really show the numbers for these voidable deals because they don't actually exist. but the Saints were trying to make sure they don't get in trouble for this down the road because sometimes you need to report the numbers. So I think this was Sean's way of trolling people and coming up with 4-year 140 like you didn't need to go that high. That's the amount of money Russell Wilson makes, which is also ironic. So it's not an actual 4-year 140 deal. If anything, this actually helped them because they are saving cap space. His number goes from 16 to 12 this year, which is way more reasonable. Still not great, but obviously more reasonable. It's $4 million less. And as for Jameis Winston, a lot of people were saying, oh, I don't think he got enough. What was the market? No one saw Jameis Winston play this year besides a couple of, garbage time performances where he's throwing to the fullback in the flat. We didn't see anything from Jameis Winston. So why would a team bet on Sean Payton's 1 year of teaching this kid working out when they don't know what he looks like behind closed doors? Exactly. So people say, well, Andy Dalton got 10 million. Well, Andy Dalton also played, and he did throw 14 touchdowns. He only had 8 picks, and he looked okay. Like, we know what Andy Dalton is, and Andy Dalton's never really had a major turnover issue. Jameis Winston, we're not sure. So I wasn't surprised he got Cam Newton's type of deal where it's not a lot of money, but you can earn up way more in incentives. And I think this is a sign for people who were convinced that Sean Payton loves Jameis Winston. I think it's Sean Payton's way of saying, I like Jameis Winston. I don't love Jameis Winston. The reason I say that, Monte, is because what would stop a Chicago or an Indianapolis or, another team that needs a quarterback, or not Indianapolis anymore, but Chicago specifically, from throwing more money at Jameis Winston saying, okay, we're going to try this out? Because if that's the case, the Saints wouldn't have just offered him a base salary of $5 million, because if you really think this guy's the heir to Drew Brees, you're not going to give him $5 million. That's not the low ball offer you'd give. So I think the Jameis Winston deal is the Saints are willing to gamble for 1 year, but it's their way of showing, all right, don't get too ahead of yourself. We don't like him that way. That's how I looked at the deal.
Right. Okay. So now listen, Drew Brees, when it came to accuracy, when it came to efficiency, there's no better quarterback in the history of the NFL. But can I make the argument that with these two guys, they're going to be much more explosive and much more exciting on offense? Not this dink and dunk. They are going to be explosive.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. When you sent me the rundown, I was looking at the question. I'm like, that's a great question. I absolutely agree, because with Drew Brees, it's the efficiency that you love. It's the 2-minute drill. It's the no huddle. It's the ability to make the changes at the line of scrimmage. So the Saints are going to miss that, and that is going to hurt them. There's going to be times where they could be down 3 and they need to get down the field. And I don't know if Jameis or Taysom Hill would be able to do that. I know Taysom Hill can't. I watched him struggle with it in the 4 games he was in. They will be more explosive, though. There's no doubt in my mind. You're going to actually see them take shots downfield. A shot play for the Saints last year was like 20 yards downfield, not exactly a shot play. So the Saints are going to have that deep element of their offense back. And the one thing Sean loved to do with Drew in his prime was, if it's second and short and it's around midfield, play action shot play. I think they'll bring that back with Jameis Winston, absolutely. And I think they actually, even if Jameis is named the starter, which that is my belief, he will be named the starter, they have to use Taysom Hill because he gives them that running element. He gives them that wildcat. And now no one has to complain about Drew Brees getting taken off the field, and you're taking a Hall of Famer off the field for Taysom Hill, because Jameis has turnover issues. So the less you see of Jameis, the less likely that he throws interceptions at a high rate. So I think we're going to see this weird hybrid offense where it's going to be 80% Jameis Winston, 20% Taysom Hill, and it's going to be interesting. But there's no doubt in my mind they will be more fun to watch. It might not translate to more wins. I don't think it will. But they will be more fun to watch, absolutely, because with Jameis, he could sling it around the field. And Taysom Hill, you never know what's going to happen. He's going to have a good game or he's going to have a terrible game. But either way, he's going to have people talking about him on Twitter.
Here you go, Chris. Chris really knows his stuff. Compliments for you. All right, so you agree with that. Their yards per play should be much better than it was last year.
Yeah, not even close. And I think what's interesting, Monte, about that is if they can do that, if they can get decent production out of Jameis and decent production out of Taysom, they're actually going to open up more, more space for their playmakers. Because Michael Thomas, the other reason why, besides the fact that he was injured this year, that he struggled, it's much harder for Michael Thomas to shake corners when they know he's not running any route past 10 yards, because that's Drew Brees' wheelhouse. It's a slant here. It's an out there. It's a curl flat. It's nothing that's going to make defenders get worried. So they can press up on him. They can play tight coverage, and it doesn't bother them. But now if you have that element where you can throw, you can give him a double move or you can throw a deep post, I think that actually makes corners have to back off. And interestingly enough, Michael Thomas only had 200-yard receiving games this past season. Both of them came with Taysom Hill. I'm not saying Taysom Hill's better than Drew Brees, obviously, because that's not the case at all. I'm saying when Michael Thomas gets to open up his route tree, it really does help him out.
Okay, we're talking with Chris Rosaglu live here on the Full Monty Sports Show. Chris, final question about the Saints. They got the 28th pick. If I'm the Saints, I know you want a defensive back. You want help in this, but I gotta get a speedy wide receiver. That's where I'm going. Where are you going?
Oh, absolutely. So with 28th pick, what I'm leaning towards, and the reason I'm not going to go speedy wide receivers because I think they could actually get one later. I have my eyes on Anthony Schwartz from Auburn. I think
From Auburn, yeah.
Yeah, he is a speedster, and I know the Saints visited with him on a meeting virtually, so maybe that's someone they can get in the mid rounds.
I saw him going in the second round. Would you take him in the 28th pick? I
You
saw him
know,
going like the third or fourth pick in the second round. Maybe the Jets look at him. Would you like that?
the reason I wouldn't go 28th pick is I do think that the Saints might be able to get a Rondale Moore with the 28th pick, and if I can pick, I'd rather have Moore than Schwartz. And the only reason is I think Moore is a little bit more versatile, and I know that.
Are you worried about his size?
I'm not actually worried about his size because I've seen the Saints take these smaller guys, whether it's a Deontay Harris or a Darren Sproles or a Brandon Cooks. I've seen the Saints take a guy of that mold and be able to figure out a role for them. I do think they need a wide receiver. You're absolutely right. But the only reason I'm not going to take a wide receiver at 28 is because I really like Greg Newsome from Northwestern if he's there at that spot. The Saints need a cornerback. They need one bad. Marshawn Lattimore's got 1 year left on his deal, so I don't know what's going to happen there. Like I said, they cut Janoris Jenkins. So right now, their second cornerback is PJ Williams. That's terrible. I'm just going to be honest with you. That's not going to fly. So can they get a Greg Newsome if he's at 28? The dream scenario for Saints fans is J.C. Horn. You get Joe Horn, former Saints wide receiver, son on the team. That would be a dream. But I think he's going before 28. I think he's a really good corner that's flying off draft boards because of his physicality and his tape against Auburn this past season. He had multiple interceptions. He was fantastic. I like Greg Newsome from Northwestern. Now, if Newsome's off the board, if J.C. Horn's off the board, they can't get one of these top-tier corners, I agree with you. Get a wide receiver because, the other issue with Michael Thomas, besides the fact that he is doing these short routes and he's facing press coverage, who's the guy across from him? Okay, last year, the one time they get a guy across from him in Emmanuel Sanders, you don't have Michael Thomas on the field because he's injured. You go to the year before. Okay, who is it? Ted Ginn, Traquan Smith. These are not guys across from Michael Thomas that are going to strike fear in the defense. So I do agree. The wide receiver position, it's been flying under the radar for the Saints. They've been able to get past people saying, hey, they really need another wideout because they have Kamara. They've always had good tight end play. But I do agree, whether it's a Rondale Moore, whether it is a Schwartz, they need to get someone in there. And even in Iowa, Amir Smith-Marset, someone who's a speed wide receiver, get him in that building.
Yeah, it's interesting because, the draft is April 29th. And what's so interesting about this draft this year is there are two teams that you would think really need another wide receiver help, and they draft before you. And that is the Ravens and the Patriots, who are so high on Moore. So I don't even think he's going to be there with the 28th pick.
Yeah, it's definitely possible. And I think for the Saints, the good thing for me is I feel like now the newer regime, I know they still have Mickey Loomis, but bringing in Jeff Ireland, they do a good job of not reaching for the position, which is fine. But what I want the Saints to make sure they don't fall victim of is if there is a guy at a position of need, don't just pass him up because we're completely drafting for the future. And what I mean by that, and I'm sure you remember with the Packers could have drafted Brandon Ayuk this past year. And if you added Brandon Ayuk to that offense, you're probably thinking the Super Bowl. You know what I mean? So I don't want the Saints to draft for 2022 when they can draft for 2021. I know it sounds crazy, but
one of the reasons why the Packers lost to Tampa Bay is they just didn't have depth at wide receiver. And the reason why they didn't have depth at wide receiver is because they took Jordan Love, who was a third-string quarterback in the first round. So terrible job. And by the way, you brought up Carson Wentz. I'm just saying it now. You're my witness. Carson Wentz is going to be in the MVP hunt next year in Indianapolis with Frank Reich and running that offense.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. I got a little hate on Twitter about it because I said, this is a great fit. If you're Carson Wentz, the best thing that could have happened to you was you get traded to Indy because
exactly.
Their O-line's great. Their running game is great. No one talks about that, but Jonathan Taylor's, under the radar had over 1,000 yards rushing in his rookie year, and that wasn't that great for him. And they lost Marlon Mack. They got him back on a 1-year deal. They have Naheem Hines. I would love to see them add Zach Ertz. I know it's being a little biased here of seeing a reunion between Ertz, Wentz, and Reich, but I think they could use another pass-catching tight end. Michael Pittman's going to be a second-year wideout. That's a guy who
love him at USC. Love him.
People are going to love him.
How about Jonathan Taylor? Didn't start a couple games because he was in Frank Reich's doghouse. But people don't understand. Frank Reich, the head coach of Indianapolis, was the offensive coordinator when Carson Wentz had his MVP season. He played 13 games and they won the Super Bowl.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's why it's funny to me. We're so ready to write off certain quarterbacks. Like, for example, when people write off Jameis Winston, I'm almost okay with it because I haven't seen Jameis play great yet. But I've seen Carson Wentz play great. Now, was it a couple of years ago? Absolutely. But I also thought in 2019 he played pretty well. And how the Eagles reward him. They drafted a quarterback in the second round. So you're not exactly doing him any favors. So you put him in Indianapolis where they don't have that crazy fan base that you throw one bad pass, they're on your neck ready to just start yelling at you and telling that you're not good and you're bust and whatever. So you're with a great coaching staff, great support system. You don't have to deal with the fans in Philly. And like you said, emerging young talent. Jonathan Taylor and Michael Pittman are two guys that if I have to pick second-year risers, they're going to be on that list for me with guys that you maybe slept on a little bit their rookie year, and all of a sudden you're playing in fantasy and you're losing against teams that have those guys on their roster. So I love this Indianapolis team. If they can re-sign T.Y. Hilton for cheap, that would just further this offense, get them even better. And I'm interested to see what they do in the draft because, I know the Chiefs will be the favorite in the AFC. I absolutely agree with like that notion, but it wouldn't shock me if Indianapolis plays that type of ball control team the majority of the year. And if they can get Wentz's MVP swagger back, why can't they compete for a Super Bowl? I just think they have all the talent to do so.
It's funny because we talk about people who you talk about people who draft well, and what Indianapolis has done over the last few years, especially getting those skill position players with, let's face it, Phillip Rivers, who was on the back nine of his career, Michael Pittman and Jonathan Taylor did a tremendous job for that team.
They did. And it's funny because that's why I mentioned the 1,000-yard rushing. Jonathan Taylor fumbled the ball a couple of times. And then you mentioned Frank Reich put him in the doghouse. And for him to come back and play so well, that speaks volumes about that type of kid. And he's always been good. At Wisconsin, he was fantastic. He looked good in his rookie year. It was funny for me when I was watching free agency unfold. The Colts were considered a team in the sweepstakes for Trent Williams. If they got Trent Williams, that left side of their line between him and Quentin Nelson would just be mauling guys left and right. Carson Wentz would never get sacked. It'd be the funniest thing in the world. But I do think that this Indianapolis team, if there's one thing I would get for them, I think they need one more wideout because even let's say they re-sign T.Y. Hilton. I think you need one more young guy, unless they think that Pascal's going to be that guy that just takes that next step, which he very much can. I know they just gave him a second-round tender, but I do think the Colts have all the pieces here. And what they have going their way, Houston Texans have the best quarterback in the division. He's probably not going to be on their roster.
Not going to be there. Yeah, and they need a left tackle, right? They need a left tackle.
Yeah, with Costanzo retiring, which was kind of a shock for a lot of people, they definitely need to go left tackle.
Okay, we're going to do a little rapid-fire question here. I'm in the minority with all my friends, all my family, all people on Twitter. Jamar Chase or Devontae Smith. Smith won the Heisman. I watched every Alabama game, and when they had injuries to their wide receiver, this guy was double and triple teamed, yet he was always open. It can't just be the offensive scheme because let's be honest, the SEC has elite defensive players. I'm taking Devontae Smith. I have a feeling you're taking LSU and Jamar Chase if you had to pick.
I am taking Jamar Chase because I like LSU wide receivers, the way they translate to the next level. And we saw his former teammate, Justin Jefferson, was basically the best rookie wideout this year. I need to add to your point, though. People need to stop saying that Devontae Smith's a product of the system. Like, that's not true. There's no play call every single time that gets the guy wide open. Like, exactly. Right. Exactly. It's the funniest thing to me. And when I see mock drafts of him falling to like pick 15 or 16, it drives me nuts. He's a top 10 pick. And just because I'll pick Jamar Chase doesn't mean that Devontae is not worth being in the conversation, because if Devontae goes top 5, the kid deserves it.
Where do you see them going? Top 15?
I absolutely. I actually think, for me, I would be shocked if the two of them don't go top 10. I know people keep bringing up his size and his frame, Devontae Smith, which is so funny to me because Jamar Chase is only 6 feet tall. They're both going top 10 in my opinion. I think that Miami's going to take one of them. And that would be great if they compare them with who they just got, Will Fuller. And I think there's going to be another team in the mix, maybe even a New York Giants team that grabs up another wide receiver. I know they got Galladay, but it never hurts to add wide receiver talent.
Okay, who are you taking now? Are you taking Travis Etienne or are you taking Najee Harris from Alabama? Who are you taking?
It honestly, I'm not trying to have like a cop out here, but I really think it depends on the system. I think if you're one of those really, really unique play callers, I think Travis Etienne's your guy because you can do a little.
Because he can play all 3 downs, right? I mean,
yeah, exactly. Now, it might, if you're a run heavy team, we've seen what Tennessee's doing with Derrick Henry, and that works perfectly. Najee Harris is impressive, and he's really good. And he actually is a better receiver than Derrick Henry was at this stage by a mile. So I like both of them. I actually think that Najee Harris might go earlier. Like, for example, I think that if Miami wanted to take Najee Harris with their second first-round pick, I think that's a good fit for them. But I do think if I was picking and I'm an offensive mind and I'm trying to figure out who I want in my scheme, I think I would go Travis Etienne.
You know, my dream scenario is the Jets draft Sewell with the number 2 pick, and then they kind of move up, or if he's available, take Travis Etienne with the 23rd pick. We know running backs don't really go in the top 10 anymore, so that's my dream scenario. Do you think either one of these guys will be drafted in the top 15?
I'm going to say no for top 15. I think both of them are definitely going to go in the first round, though. And you know what's funny? I was thinking about it. If Tampa Bay is picking 32 and for some reason Etienne falls to 32.
Oh, my, don't say that.
I'm just saying it would make a lot of sense. Then they don't have to worry about paying Ronald Jones in a year from now. They could just let him walk. And we saw the Chiefs did a similar thing where Clyde Edwards-Helaire went at the end of the first round. So
and if he didn't get hurt, if they didn't get their offensive line hurt, and if he didn't get hurt midway through, he was on pace to be Rookie of the Year.
Yeah, he was fantastic. And I think that for these teams, when you're picking 31, 32, why not add the guy? Maybe it's not a position of need for you, but it's the guy that's the best player available by a mile, and you'll find a way. And I think the Bucs actually, the one thing they were missing was a receiving back. They basically had to turn Leonard Fournette into that receiving back. So if you can add, I'm not saying I want it to happen, but if they could add a Travis Etienne, it wouldn't hurt.
That'd be scary. Okay, let's talk about LSU right here. Ed Orgeron done a tremendous job. Everywhere he goes, he wins. But I don't think Ed Orgeron is a guy like a Nick Saban that pays attention to every detail. Great recruiter. People love him. But I'm going to say this, and I know it sounds crazy. They won a national championship 2 years ago. They were 5-5 last year. If he doesn't win 10 games, is this guy out of a job next year?
I don't think he's out of a job next year if they don't win 10 games, but I think what it does is the following year for 2022, that's the make or break season. Like, that's it. If he doesn't do well, then he's fired. And I do agree with you. I think Ed Orgeron is a good coach, but I need people to understand why you can't compare a guy like Ed Orgeron to a guy like Nick Saban. Nick Saban loses coaches every single season. Every single year, he's going to lose a top-tier coach, and it doesn't matter. And he retools, and he finds a way to get his team back in the national championship picture. LSU, now we only have 1 year of seeing that sample size, but LSU loses Joe Brady, they lose their defensive coordinator, and they win 5 games. And let's be real, the losses that they had were bad losses at Mizzou. They had some really bad
that defense was atrocious last year.
So it's telling me one of two things. It's either one, that this LSU team kind of was a one-hit wonder because they were loaded with talent, which is very much possible, or two, and this is the scary thing for LSU if that's the case, Ed Orgeron actually can't scout other coaches and evaluate coaches better than people thought he could. So he lucked out with the Joe Brady, who revolutionized their offense, because back then LSU would have great wide receivers with terrible quarterback play, and it would never work out. Their offense would be atrocious. In comes Joe Brady with Joe Burrow, who was a transfer. You got lucky in that department too, and all of a sudden they're scoring 50 points a game.
One of the things that Ed Orgeron, and this is why Les Miles got fired, there was like a 5-year period when you look at Jarvis Landry, Odell Beckham Jr., where their offensive players in LSU, they had more first-round picks than Alabama did. So you're saying to yourself, okay, we got the talent. These guys are thriving in the NFL, but we can't beat Alabama. And one of the things I'll say that I love that what Nick Saban does is Nick Saban almost always hires former head coaches. He doesn't hire other coordinators because he knows that these guys are professional. He did that with Mario Cristobal. He did that with his offensive coordinators. They were all former Lane Kiffin. They were all former head coaches. So they're so professional. They know what they have to do. And that's one thing that Nick Saban does so well is he always brings in former head coaches to be the coordinators.
Yeah, and now people, they made fun of him on social media that he brought in Bill O'Brien, he brought in Doug Marrone. Okay, let's see what happens, because I guarantee you Bill O'Brien and Doug Marrone, I'm going to go with both, are going to find a head coaching gig somewhere down the line, whether it's NFL, whether it's college again. He got a little bit of heat for bringing in Sark. Now Sark's with Texas. So there you go. He quickly gets a job. Lane Kiffin, comes there. All of a sudden you find him now at Ole Miss. So they, Pruitt, who people didn't even think was that great, ends up going to Tennessee. Now he's already fired. Nick Saban just rebuilds coaches. He helps their image out. And with Ed Orgeron, it took LSU about 4 chances to get their defensive coordinator this offseason. That's alarming for me. And it's not a talent thing because LSU always recruits well. And you mentioned the wide receivers. They had another great one this year, Terrace Marshall, but we didn't hear much about Terrace Marshall because the quarterback position has been so bad for this program for the 1 year exception with Joe Burrow. So it brings up the point that they're bad at two things. They're not great at getting in supporting coaching staff, and they're not particularly great at the quarterback position. And if you can't do those two things well, you're never going to be in Alabama. And that's fine. If LSU is cool with winning one championship in a 15-year span, then absolutely, that's fine. But the standard for Alabama every year is championship or bust. And it doesn't matter if they lose two coordinators or they lose their star players. They're losing Mac Jones this year. They're losing Devontae Smith. They're losing Najee Harris. They're losing Jalen Waddle. Well, guess what? They're going to reload. They're going to have Bryce Young. They're going to have great receivers like John Mechie out there. So you know why? If Alabama can do this every single year, and Georgia almost does it to a certain extent too, why
especially
can't
with running backs?
Yeah, absolutely.
And this is a great point right here by Daniel. Ed Orgeron is Andy Reid, Nick Saban is Belichick. Not comparable. And this is what goes back to why. And again, I think they're both going to be very good, but this is why I would take Devontae Smith, because when their other wide receiver got hurt, Waddle, okay, they were double teaming him. And like you said, he can't be open all the time when their defense is trying to stop him. So it's got to be something he does, right?
He's fantastic. Someone said that he's a mix, I believe, of Reggie Wayne and Marvin Harrison. I said, if that kid's a mix of those things, he's going to be a Hall of Famer. Just get his gold jacket ready. And he's so good. And it's always on the big stage. Notre Dame, he lights them up. Ohio State, I mean, he had 200 receiving yards in the first half. So I agree with you. You can't tell me that it's a system thing. Now, if it was a system thing, I think every other receiver on Alabama would be doing the things he was doing, because he was, his game was to a certain extent to a different level. It was an all SEC schedule that he did this against. And, they didn't play as many games as they used to. They probably would have had 2 or 3 more games if it was a legitimate full season, and he still put insane numbers. I'm not worried about him. Even though I do prefer Jamar by a hair, these people who are worried about him, it drives me nuts. It almost reminds me, and I know it's a different position, but I saw Deshaun Watson play great in college. Why did he fall to, what was it, pick 12? Like, it just made no sense. What did they see that we didn't see that made him fall? So if Devontae Smith falls, and I've seen him in some mock drafts fall as far to like 14 or 15 to that Minnesota Vikings range, I'll pull my hair out at that point, because I don't understand why that would happen. He's that good. And we saw rookie wide receivers dominate the NFL this past season. He'll be the next one to do so.
It's amazing, because one of the reasons why I wanted the Jets to go out and get Deshaun Watson, and I said this on the show, in back-to-back national championship games against Alabama, he lost his 1 year, he come back, he wins. Deshaun Watson was the best player on the field for 2 years, and Nick Saban had 8 weeks to prepare. In those 2 years, he still couldn't stop him. And what makes no sense to me, not to beat on the Bears, we had Daniel Goodwin on, the Bears took Mitchell Trubisky, who went to North Carolina, in the same division as Deshaun Watson. It makes no sense to me why they would do that and not take Deshaun Watson.
No, absolutely. And remember when the draft happened, it was the weirdest thing for me throughout the process was when we got to the combine and everything started. For some reason, Mitch Trubisky was just put as the consensus QB1 on everyone's board. And I'm like, I don't know why. The one game I actually, when the hype started building about Mitch, I was like, okay, let me watch this kid. I watched UNC Stanford. It wasn't even his fault, because UNC's offensive line got lit up by Solomon Thomas and those guys at that point, but he made no game-breaking plays. And then to your point, you watch Deshaun Watson go up against a Nick Saban defense, which knows what they need to face, and he just lights them up and has a game-winning touchdown with literally 1 second left on the clock. He was phenomenal. And then now we go see where one's an all-pro quarterback and the other one is playing on a 1 year, $2.5 million contract to be a backup for Buffalo, which he'll never see the field in that position. So
he'll never see the field.
That people overthink certain things. Do not overthink Devontae Smith. He's that good. And, I know people are going to say, well, was Jerry Jeudy this good? Or, Henry Ruggs didn't look this good. They're two different receivers, because Henry Ruggs is a speed threat in an offense that didn't really take advantage of him. And I actually thought Ruggs wasn't as good. The funny thing is, so people hyped up Ruggs and Jeudy. I think Waddle and Smith are 10 times better than them. I just think they're that good. So Smith, for me, he's not Jerry Jeudy. He's got way better hands. He's a better route runner. I would be shocked if he doesn't have, bearing what his quarterback situation is. But if quarterback situation's okay, it wouldn't shock me if this kid has over 1,000 receiving yards in his first season. He's that good. I just don't want to see people overthink a guy who dominates at the highest level.
In the best conference.
Yeah, against the best DBs too. He goes up in practice against a Patrick Surtain. On the field, he'll face a JC Horn. He'll face great competition. Just please, if you're these teams, do not overthink it. How about Ohio State? They had Sean Wade, who people hyped up as a great cornerback. He had no chance of
Dominated him. Dominated him in the first
chance.
half. It was over. And going back to Deshaun Watson, he dominated. He was the best player on the field for 2 years against Alabama. I mean, it wasn't even close.
Yeah, and it's funny to me when they're on the brightest stage and they shine. What you want them to do on the brightest stage is just play out of their minds. And when they do it, it's still not good enough for you. It just shocks me. I just don't understand it. And I'm sure when this kid goes to the NFL and he plays well, we'll have a chat about how we were right about this one. Now, it doesn't. I'll still take Jamar, but I think Devontae is going to be a flat out beast.
Chris, final question: you following the NCAA tournament at all? Who do you have winning it?
It's been amazing. I was talking about this with my coworkers. I feel like this year more than ever, the lower seeds, man, they're not backing down. They're not backing down. And as for who I like right now, I don't want to be the basic guy and say, well, Gonzaga, but I mean, how can you not? The way they played yesterday, that game against Norfolk State was it was over. It was over before it started. And they were the only one seed for me that came out immediately and just put away the 16 seed, didn't give them a chance. Now, I do think that today we're going to have some interesting games. And I grew up a Syracuse fan, so I will be rooting for Syracuse today against West Virginia.
That's my closing rant. I love my boy, Buddy Boeheim.
Buddy Boeheim has been great, and it all kind of starts with him because when he shoots the lights out, and he had a 16-0 run by himself at one point, or 16 straight points, whatever it was, against San Diego State. When he shoots the ball well, it opens up the rest of the court, and this is an old Big East rivalry. You're playing West Virginia, Bob Huggins, Jim Boeheim, a lot of history there. I like that game. The early game for me, and I believe it just tipped off, but the Illinois versus Loyola, Chicago Loyola game for Loyola, if they somehow pull off this upset, it's got to be the sister Gene magic because Illinois looked dominant too in their game. I really want to see what happens with Oral Roberts. I think the last 15 seed we had making the Sweet 16 was Florida Gulf Coast. So if they can pull out an upset there, that would be something. But the real heartbreaker for me is I was looking at this schedule. Villanova gets North Texas in the second round.
Right.
If they had their star point guard Gillespie, I think they'd have a chance to make a Final Four run because you don't get that lucky that you get a 13 seed in your second draw. That's very fortunate for them. And my last point, tomorrow, you're going to get a double-digit seed in the Sweet 16. UCLA is going to verse, Abilene Christian that knocked off Texas in one that probably busted everyone's bracket. So I love it. I think it's been fantastic. But if I do have to make my pick and I'm saying who I think it's going to win, I'm just going to go Gonzaga because I've been telling everyone all year, they're the one team where all 5 of their starters, one of them has the chance to just go off any night. They're that good, whether it's Drew Timme, whether it's Corey Kispert.
You can't key on any one player. You can't.
Exactly.
And I say this all the time with teams like Gonzaga. We saw this with Butler a few years ago. When you have I wouldn't consider Gonzaga a mid-major, but one of the things when I used to coach, we would get transfers. We'd get guys who were junior and seniors, 22, 23 years old. They're men. And they're going up against these freshmen and sophomores who haven't seen this. They don't get rattled. They don't get flustered during the game. And I will say this: if Buddy Boeheim scores 25-30 and they win, he's potentially going to have a Steph Curry-like run in this tournament because he's playing. Not only is he playing great, he's smiling. He's got swag. It's like all the confidence in the world is in him.
Yeah, and it was so funny, the second half at the end. I mean, he's shooting a 3-point shot from the logo contested, and you almost felt like it was definitely going to go in, which it did because he just has that confidence. And it hasn't even just been this one game. He's been on a run. He had 31 against UVA in the ACC tournament. He played really well against NC State. I believe he's averaging over 25.5 over his last 6 games.
He's lights out. Good. I'm going to talk about him next. Yeah, he's lights out.
And I'm going to be honest with you, Monte, and I know it's going to sound like my Syracuse bias is coming in here, but if they beat West Virginia and Buddy Boeheim plays well, I think the Syracuse team is going to make the Elite Eight because I actually think that the West Virginia draw for them would be more difficult than them playing a Houston or a Rutgers team. Definitely if they play Rutgers, and even with Houston, a good team, we've seen these programs, and we just saw with San Diego State. They don't play the 2-3 zone all year, and you can criticize the 2-3 zone all you want, but until you see it up close and personal, it gets you. And San Diego State had about a 10-minute spurt where they couldn't put the ball in the basket. So I would not be shocked if Syracuse, every time they're a double-digit seed, they make a crazy run.
It's funny because growing up, I loved Syracuse. They were my favorite team. And then once I started coaching college basketball, I would travel all across the country because I coached Division III. Division I started a month before us. So I went up to see a Syracuse practice, right? and I saw how it was run, and I was like, this is our practices are harder. We're more disciplined. Jim Boeheim didn't even have like a practice schedule. Then I went to Duke's practice the following week, and it was to the minute. And it was from that point on that I said, I'm done with Jim Boeheim in that 2-3 zone. I'm always going to root for them. But when I saw how hard Duke worked at practice and how lackadaisical the Syracuse practice was, it was literally like an eighth grade practice. Guys were going to get water without asking. People were like, it was just, I was like, I drove 5-6 hours for this. I learned nothing.
That's incredible. That was incredible. I actually wanted to mention, because you brought up Boeheim. It was so funny. Jim Nantz brought it up in the broadcast. They were saying, how does Jim Boeheim speak to him? He's like, I don't talk to him. I've been speaking to him for the last 20 years. I got nothing to say to him.
No, so listen, his son is playing out of this world. And when he came in, he was just a shooter. He was scrawny. He's obviously worked out. Look, he's not going pro this year. He's going to come back for his senior year. And one of the things I love to see growing up, you would see Patrick Ewing, all these players stay 3-4 years, right? So he's going to come back next year because they don't need the money. It's not like he's going anywhere. And like you said, if they beat West Virginia, listen, they could have another Carmelo Anthony-like run.
No, they can, and that's why I'll be rooting for Loyola Chicago today. If they knock off Illinois, because Illinois is the one team where they play that inside-out style that I think would dominate the zone. You got Kofi Cockburn, who's a great center. He's actually from the Christ the King, so I actually used to watch him back in high school because he'd play my former high school Malloy, and he would just dominate them. He's just such a talented center. Cuse is going to need some help, but Cuse has always gotten some help when they're these double-digit seeds. I remember they played Middle Tennessee State in the second round because Middle Tennessee State, a 15 seed, knocked off a Michigan State team that was really good as a 2. So you need some luck, you need some help in the NCAA tournament, but why can't they? And you mentioned Buddy Boeheim coming back another year. I actually think that's something we're missing with college. I think if more of these superstars did actually play a couple more years, I think it would add a little bit of intrigue to the sport, because you kind of have to renew and reload these rosters every year. So guys that you got comfortable with, they're not there anymore, with the Kentucky, with the Duke. But I love it. I think the Syracuse team, the majority of them outside of Marek Dolezaj, they're all going to be back. So they're going to have a chance, whether it's this year or next year, to make a nice run with Jim.
Yeah, listen, I remember not a few years ago, but I remember when like I said, I root for Duke. But I remember a few years ago when John Wallace made his run. John Wallace, the Knicks drafted him. He had a phenomenal play. He was averaging like 26 and 12. It was Derek Comic like what John Wallace was doing a few, when they made it to the Final Four.
Yeah, and for me with the Cuse teams, it's always the weird ones that outside of Melo's team, because Melo's team was fantastic start to finish. It's always the weird teams that make the Final Four for Cuse. And, the Michael Carter-Williams Syracuse team, they made the Final Four. And then Carter-Williams gets drafted a top 11 pick. He becomes a Rookie of the Year. Whether it's the Michael Benajay, Malachi Richardson team that beat UVA after being down 17 in the second half, and they were a double-digit seed Cuse as well. So it's a very weird thing. When Syracuse is a powerhouse, I don't really trust them when they're in this underdog role, and people say they shouldn't have made the tournament, and maybe they shouldn't have. Maybe their resume wasn't that great, but they get in, and Cuse just, they deploy this 2-3 zone. Whether or not they're practicing hard on it, I don't know, but it's clearly working during the game. I think it's fascinating to see. And you mentioned rooting for Duke. I actually think the one thing we're missing from this tournament, because I've enjoyed it, it's been a blast, I do miss not having the blue bloods like a Duke, like in Kentucky. Kansas struggled the other day, so they didn't look too impressive as a blue blood, and then UNC already bounced out. I do miss that element of the tournament, though. I will say that.
Yeah, and listen, like you said, when it comes to just basically the Syracuse teams, it's always been the team that you didn't think. And listen, the reason why I was trying to explain this to my dad, the reason why their defense is so unique and so, because teams don't see it. Everyone plays man to man, or they go that full court press. They'll mix up zone. But what makes Syracuse so good, and Jim Boeheim has been a master of this, is he always drafts long players, whether they're too skinny, but they're so long, so there's nowhere to go on that 2-3 zone. And if you haven't practiced against it, it was almost like Georgetown's press back in the day with Patrick Ewing. Once you prepare for it, you can beat it so easily. But that Syracuse, as I put the Syracuse background up, that Syracuse zone is hard for teams that never played against it.
It is, and I'll throw out one name for tonight's game against West Virginia. If Syracuse does win, I think he'll play a big factor, because he played a big factor against San Diego State. Sophomore center Jesse Edwards. I think he's from the Netherlands. So it goes to your point. Jim Boeheim is looking for long guys. He's 7 feet tall. He's got a long wingspan. He's looking for a disruptor, and Jesse Edwards is that guy. So if Syracuse is going to win that game, they're going to need guys like Jesse Edwards, Kadary Richmond off the bench, who are these long players to make an impact. And I think if they come out and they shoot the ball the way they did against San Diego State, they're going to be perfectly fine. And not even that well, because I don't know if you're going to hit 50% of your threes again.
Right.
But the length for Cuse is the key. And I think what actually bodes well for them is West Virginia has always been a good pressing team. They're not that good at the press this year. They just don't have those type of athletes. And Cuse, on the flip side, the one area that always concerns me with this team in particular, their point guard, Joseph Girard, he's not a playmaking guard. He's
not an assist guy. No, not at all.
Exactly. He can hit the three, but let's say the Cuse was getting pressed full court, throughout the whole game. I don't know if he's the guy to break the press, set up his teammates with easy shots. So I think that helps out Cuse, but it really all starts and ends with Buddy Boeheim. If he's shooting well, he's going to open up the rest of the floor for his guys. And we saw that he had the 19 first half points, and all of a sudden Girard's hitting shots, and all of a sudden Kadary Richmond's hitting shots, and Robert Braswell's hitting shots. So it starts and ends with him. If Cuse had a playmaking point guard, I like them just a little bit more.
Yeah, I agree.
I do think that this is a fun team to watch, and I think it's going to be a great game. When you get Bob Huggins, you get Jim Boeheim, two coaches with 900 wins or more, you're bound for a great game.
It's definitely going to be fun. Listen, Chris, we went a little long, but I appreciate you coming on. How can we follow and support you? And go Orange. That's all I got to say.
Absolutely. So people can follow me on Twitter at Rosvogel Report, as you can see on the screen right there, spelled that way. And then if they want to check out my work, whether it's on the NCAA tournament, I've been doing NFL draft interviews. They can check that out too. It's at The Spun. Just type in thespun.com. You'll see all the stuff there. And if they want to hear some Saints rants, sports overtime, or straight up Saints, either one, you can find it on Apple. I'm doing both podcasts each week. People can check me out there.
All right, Chris, love having you on. Have you on down the road. And if Syracuse gets to the Final Four, you'll definitely come on.
Absolutely. Thank you, Monte. Take care.
All right, take care. That was Chris Rosevogel, who does a tremendous job. Listen, I'm just going to really quick close, my final point, my extra point. Just real quickly, listen, enjoy the games today. Like I said, if you want some players to watch, definitely watch Buddy Boeheim today against Syracuse. Like I said, he's been scoring 30 points a game. He's one of the best shooters in the country. He's the son of head coach Jim Boeheim. So definitely watch that. Enjoy the games, everyone. I want to thank Daniel Goodwin III. I want to thank Chris Rosevogel. And I want to thank you for making this show as good as it's been. Like I said, we're trending number 3. And if you like this show, if you like sports and comedy, tell one friend, tell one family member. So let's get this number 3 to number 1. Let's get this number 3 to number 1. We are off on Tuesday, but we will be back next Sunday with the full Monte Sports Show live on YouTube. And in the immortal words of Arnold Schwarzenegger, I'll be back.